Hello, my name is Jennifer Gardner, and this is the Rome How Podcast, where I speak to thought leaders, writers, speakers, and disruptors who have reinvented themselves and created work they love. I created Rome How as a way to explore and share with you the stories of people who inspire me, multi-talented creative professionals with a unique approach to life and work. Join me as we look under the hood and discover what inspires them, how they got to where they are, their fears, struggles, and triumphs. By listening to them, my goal is that we are inspired to do the next big, without-a-box thing in our own lives.
Bullies today now, with technology, they have a larger platform. They have a lack of restraint. When they don't have to look at a person face-to-face, eye-to-eye, it gives them the power on the keypad. We have 92% of Americans today armed with smartphones. We're not afforded the luxury anymore of an oops moment without risking it going viral.
Hello, Rome Howell listeners. I took a short hiatus from creating new episodes because I've been extremely busy cooking up some new business plans and finishing up the course I created that helps people grow their businesses through mindset and productivity and communication strategies. I had this episode ready to go, but I delayed because I wanted to nail the introduction and I suffered from hopelessly fractured focus. Today's topic is all about cyberbullying, cybershaming, and digital resilience. I can report from the trenches on this critical issue. In my law practice, I have represented people who have been sued for defaming others online when they legitimately complained, for example, in a ripoff report. I've also had clients who were victims of trolls and online haters. I've represented people who were badgered by an angry digital mob into taking down an art exhibit. The First Amendment did not win the day in that case. I also help people strategically communicate to minimize the effects of online harassment and bullying, and I support them in having the confidence to be more visible so their customers and clients can find them. So many business owners are afraid to be more visible precisely for this reason. It stops them from using this amazing technology to its fullest to grow their businesses. And then I read this story about a sixth grader in Mississippi who hung himself after being called fat, ugly, and worthless at school. He was bullied to death, and my heart broke for him. I was once that sixth grader. I remember the absolute despair I felt at the time. Obviously, I survived, but so many do not. So when I read that story, it made me realize that I couldn't wait any longer to release this episode. My next guest is Sue Sheff. Sue is really well known as being an advocate against online hate. She herself was a victim of cyberbullying and harassment before it was even a thing. And back in the day, she filed a lawsuit and won a huge verdict to get her reputation back. Sue can tell her story better than I can, and that's why we have this interview. Sue, along with Melissa Shore, is the author of Shame Nation, which is an amazing book with a foreword written by Monica Lewinsky, someone else who knows how the choices we make as humans sometimes have unintended and long-lasting consequences. Online hate is so real and so tragic. Our society has become incredibly toxic in the way we disagree with each other, and it's so difficult for people to disagree politely anymore, which is one of the reasons why I started this podcast. And that's why this topic means so much to me. Sue and I talk all about this, and here is the interview. Sue, first of all, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today on the podcast, because I know you're in the throes of launching this new book, Shame Nation, so you must be extremely busy, and I'm really, really grateful.
Well, I want to thank you for having me. It's an important topic, so we look for every opportunity to share it with everybody.
Absolutely. Tell us, what is the topic?
Well, it's the topic of this global epidemic of online hate that we're seeing, from online shaming to cyberbullying to internet defamation. It seems that everyone just feels the need that they can go out and harm people, even if they don't have any reason to. I mean, it's the screens that we have when you have a screen that hides you, you have more of the ability to hurt people without seeing the remorse, without having that feeling of that you are hurting somebody. You're more empowered to harm people when you don't have to face that person eye to eye.
Right, right. And you have experience with this firsthand, unfortunately, which is what led you to writing this book. And this book is your second book on the topic, right?
It's my third book, but it's the second book on this topic. Right.
Right. Okay. So tell us about the first book, Google Bomb.
Google Bomb was about the landmark case that I won for internet defamation. And back in 2003, when I first received my scarlet letter online, is what I like to call it, because what it was I realized one day while I was sitting in my office, a doctor called me up, and as an educational consultant, psychologist referred families to me. He said, Sue, are you aware of what Google is saying about you? Back in 2003, if everybody can imagine, it was still in its infancy. There was no ORM, which is online reputation management. No one even knew of social media networking back then. There just wasn't any. There was no Twitter. There was no Facebook. If it was Facebook, it was just for college students only. So there was no social media really back then. So when he said to me, do you know what Google is saying about you? I sort of scratched my head, and I had to turn on the computer because, again, back in 2003, there was no need to even have your computer sitting on unless you were doing data entry.
Right. Things have changed.
Really, things have changed, right. So when I put my name into that little search box, I was just mortified. The internet for the first 3 pages was nothing but a smear campaign. And it was this one person, she didn't like me. It was sort of a disgruntled client. It goes a little bit deeper than that. And we're not going to get into the whole story because it was so convoluted. But long story short, when you get slimed online, just like in 2003, as is in 2017, you have trolls. You have the one person that starts, and then you have all these little, we called them minions back then, all these little minions, and you don't know who they are, but they'll just pile it on because hate loves hate. And that's what happened. And I was being called every name under the book, from a crook, from a con. I kidnapped kids. I placed kids in risky programs. And these were just bulletin boards of parent websites that they created. And it just was, like I said, the first 3 pages of Google were horrifying. And even back then, people didn't take the time to determine, was this cyber fact or cyber fiction? They just moved on to another educational consultant. And it was funny because by the time John had called me, I had noticed that my phone calls in my clientele base was diminishing. And that's when I realized why.
Wow.
So immediately I had to call a lawyer and, file for internet defamation. And let's remember this too, in 2003, who heard of internet defamation? Nobody.
Right. Your case was a landmark case.
It was only because, again, no one had heard of it. I hired a personal injury lawyer at the time. And like I said, it took 2.5 years. We went to a jury trial, and I won an $11.3 million landmark case for internet defamation and invasion of privacy. But what people need to remember is, now, it wasn't collectible out there, so I don't want people to think that, I won a lotto ticket or something. Very rare that the defendant has the money. I was vindicated, though, which, was good. But what happens was, Lady Justice clears your name in many of these defamation cases. But with Google doesn't say it's sorry. The internet is unforgiving. Right. So I was still dealing with all that stuff that was online. But fortunately for me, the very first online reputation company, the very first one, the pioneer of them all, opened their doors in 2006. And that's when I won the case, was in September of 2006 in Broward County, Florida. So when I called Reputation Defender, I was one of their first major clients. Michael Fertig actually answered the phone back in those days. He was like one. He only had like 4 or 5 employees at the time. And he told me, don't worry, I've got your back. Uh-huh. And he did. It was like 3 or 4 months later, and I finally got my life back. And I tell people still to this day, it's been a decade later, it was my lawyer that vindicated me, but it was ORM, Online Reputation Management, that gave me my life back. And that's why I'm such an advocate today. I mean, from talking about it and school assemblies to high school kids to college kids about their online presence, it will dictate your future. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression. Your first impression today is your online impression. It's just that simple, Jennifer. I think you know that too.
I do. I mean, I've represented clients on both sides of this issue, people who've been defamed and people who were having to defend themselves, where people have claimed and sued them for defamation, claiming that they slandered them online. I just can't imagine the feeling that you must have felt when you get the phone call and you Google your name and then you see 3 pages of all these hate messages.
It's so devastating. And I think what I share with people quite frequently, the reason for this next book is because the fact of the matter is, since a decade ago, since Google bomb, every time I open up the internet, I read the headlines of Bullycide, which is, death by humiliation, so to speak. And whether it's the Tyler Clementes of the world, or the Amanda Todds, or the Rebecca Sedgwicks, or the Audrey Potts, all these young people that are killing themselves.
Oh, it's so tragic.
It's tragic. But let me share with you, I get it. I get it because when I was 40-something years old and this happened to me, that's how I felt. I felt like there was no way out. I was both emotionally and financially crippled and paralyzed with fear. I mean, I didn't leave the house. You become a recluse. I had a class reunion at the time. I refused to go because I didn't want to give my name out again. I didn't want people Googling me. You feel humiliated, the fear. So if I'm feeling this way at 40-something years old, but I still had the mentality to know that, you know what, it's going to get better. Someday that light at the end of the tunnel is not going to be an oncoming train. But these young kids, they don't know that. Right. They don't know that. And that's why they're taking their life. That's why I finally said, you know what, I have to do another book, a book that shows you a decade later, there's help out there. And if you noticed in Shame Nation, it's about overcoming. And then we gave you a whole chapter on all the resources that are out there now, because this book isn't just for, adults, it's for teens too. It's for anybody that's struggling as a victim of revenge porn, a victim of sexting, a victim of online, reputation that's been damaged. So that's what I wanted Shame Nation to be about.
It's such important work that you're doing. I mean, the consciousness really needs to be raised, and it still has such a long way to go. I want to ask you, when you use the word cyber shaming or cyber bullying, I believe that it can refer to a bunch of different types of behaviors. Can you explain to the listeners what this covers?
It's a condition of humiliation, being humiliated or disgraced. You're just totally feeling you're at your wit's end, honestly. I mean, it's a painful emotion. It's like in the book we say, a painful emotion caused by a consciousness of guilt. You honestly feel like you're never going to recover from this humiliation. And that's why when I always say it's like death by humiliation, that's where that comes from. And when it's done digitally, or like you just said, cyber shaming, right, it's only magnified by 1,000,000. When we were shamed publicly or shamed in a hallway at school or shamed on a school bus, it's isolated to that one area. And, a week or a day or a month goes by and people have forgotten about it. Today, electronically, it keeps repeating itself. And what happens is, whether it's myself or a teenager or whatever, you have this feeling inside of you that you keep gravitating to go back and you keep reading it over and over again. And then you see how many times people have liked it or commented on it. And it just hurts deeper, deeper, and deeper. And that humiliation gets worse, and your loneliness and your darkness gets even deeper and darker. And the worst part is, years ago, therapists didn't know how to treat it, and they didn't even recognize it as a problem. I've gone onto a television show at one point with Michael Furtick on this, and this one therapist was trying to tell me just flippantly, you just have to move on from it. Well, this is nothing that you just move on from. This is something that you have to work through, because everyone out there that has struggled with shame and with humiliation, especially when it's digitally done to you, cyber shamed, cyber bullied, cyber stalked, it's a scar. You think the whole wide world is laughing at you, and you just don't overcome it overnight. You will eventually. I mean, it took me years. It takes a long time.
Well, I mean, I remember being bullied and teased as a kid, but we didn't have the internet then, and that was bad enough. And some of the scars from those experiences, and I think this is a human experience because I think people can be mean, but the problem is that the technology just magnifies the effects like you're so beautifully describing.
Oh, it amplifies it by a million. One of the tips I always tell people, like you always have friends or family that want to try to help you out. And what you have to have them do, you have to try to train yourself not to go back to that ugly message. Have your friends and family go back and monitor it for you and see what's going on. But you always have to document the evidence. So, but have someone else do that for you so you don't have to keep looking at it. So you don't have to keep reliving it, so to speak.
You know, it's almost like the internet and these social media platforms are such powerful inventions and tools that we can use to connect really deeply. And the negative consequences are proportionate to how these can be used as a tool for something positive. So in other words, the converse is also true. If something bad happens, you're going to feel it as powerfully.
Right. Oh, the internet overall is a positive tool. It's people, it's human behavior that's bringing the negativity out on it. So many people want to blame technology. Like they're quick to say it's the app or it's a website or it's this. But at the end of the day, it's human behavior, you know.
Yeah. And we can't, I mean, that's something that we have to accept and confront and take responsibility for. It's up to us to use it responsibly.
Right. And it's up to us to teach each other. It's just like there was that recent survey that came out. I think it was Civility in America, where it said 66% of Americans are now asking their friends to please be kinder to each other online because the incivility has gotten so out of control. I think the survey was taken, of course, over the 2016 political year. I mean, it had gotten so corrupt and so mean towards everybody online. It all comes back to us. 75% of Americans said that it does start with us. And if we could just start taking accountability for ourselves and then asking the people around us to, come on, let's start being kinder to each other. And we have to go back to that old cliche. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Your device can turn off. Turn it off. Click out.
This is so important to even talk about, to acknowledge the dark side of this powerful technology that we hold in our hands and use and are engaged with like all day long, you know?
Right. And it's good for us as adults to talk about it because I think so many people are quick to say this is a teen problem or a child's problem, when in reality, a lot of it is the adults that are stepping in the potholes here. Absolutely. Online. Absolutely. And the adults need to step up and say, hey, listen, we should be the ones leading by example. And I'm not political at all, but I look at what was coming down my news feeds during the political year, and it just mortifies me that these adults are acting like children online.
Absolutely. Especially the chief executive officer of the country, that adult.
Especially the leader of our land. Let's put it politely. That's right. Especially the leader of our land and the first lady, all of them, everyone in the House. And you know what? On both sides, Anthony Weiner. I mean, come on, all of them. Oh, Jennifer, I'm like, do these people think that they're above reproach of being caught? I'm like, oh my God. I don't know. You shake your head. You just shake your head.
You shake your head. And the thing is that as you're pointing out, the phenomenon and the misuse doesn't just affect one demographic in particular. It affects everybody. It affects young people who have access to the technology on their cell phones and their computers at home. And it affects adults and people with a heck of a lot of responsibility.
Right. No one is immune. I don't care what your race is. I don't care what your religion is. And I don't care what your age is. No one is immune to digital disasters and digital disgrace.
Yes, no one is immune. Why do you think people shame?
Because they can. We have come down to a point in our society that everything is simply a click away. Bullies today now, with technology, they have a larger platform. The weak have become brave and bold. They have a lack of restraint. When they don't have to look at a person face to face, eye to eye, it gives them the power on the keypad. We have 92% of Americans today armed with smartphones. We're not afforded the luxury anymore of an oops moment without risking it going viral. Because people, to them, it's more important to have their 15 minutes of fame online and humiliate you with infamy. That's sadly where our society has taken us. And that's where you go into plain breakup. And I think I was sharing with you with Kelly Keegan's story.
Let's tell the listeners who Kelly Keegan is.
It's a really interesting story. The plain breakup, hashtag plain breakup. Kelly was on a plane and there was a couple next to her having a bit of an argument and they were stuck on the tarmac. Now, she took out her cell phone and she decided to record them. But I think the next step that she did, maybe she shouldn't have, but this was Kelly. Kelly has a podcast of, Wine and Wine with Kelly, and she sent it out to her Twitterverse. Yeah, she tweets, the guy on the plane just broke up with his girlfriend, and she's sobbing. And then the girl says, it's just so mean. Do I deserve this? Why are you bringing this up? So anyway, what she's doing is she's tweeting out to the universe this whole hashtag plain breakup. And then Kelly says, this is the greatest plane delay I've ever had. So she's really mocking this couple, which really is it's not nice. It's totally not nice. But I think what was worse is she did snap a picture of them because if everyone remembers, if you Google the hashtag plain breakup, we did not put it in the book. You'd see a picture of them on the plane. Mm-hmm. And they did blur out their faces because she even said she would do the same thing again. She would just redact the pictures. So now we come to the point, do I condone this behavior? No, I would never do anything like this myself. But this is where people need to understand, wherever you are today, everyone out there has a cell phone in their hand. You have to mind your manners. We're all a click away. Now, let's take this out a step further. Kelly was one of the lucky ones because how many people out there, let's say an Adam Smith, for example, that pulls something like this and you lose your job. Kelly did not get fired from her job or anything like that. On the contrary, she only got, 1,000 more Twitter followers.
Thousands more. And her Wine and Wine thing went up and et cetera like that. So because 80% of workplaces out there have social media policies in place where you behave and you do something like this, they consider you an extension of their brand, whether it's offline and online now. You just have to be so careful. The Mercedes mom, the story with her and the cyclists and how she was shamed after she sort of bullied these cyclists with her car, right?
First of all, it's road rage, right? This story came to me from a friend of mine on Facebook. It was really interesting because, it was a little isolated story in North Carolina. What we were really careful with in Shame Nation is not reshaming these people again. So we didn't name them in the book. I did that intentionally. But yeah, this is a little story out of North Carolina. And she happens to work for a really big company that you would know very well. Mm-hmm. And she didn't get fired from all this, which was good. Because at the end of the day, I think every one of us can relate to what happened to her. She's driving down the road and she's got her daughter in the car and she's got to get someplace. And then you have these bikers that they're biking for a cause, so to speak. And they're tying up traffic. And what she do? She flips in the finger. But don't you know, one of those bikers has a cell phone already. And they snap her license plate. They snap a picture of her flipping the finger. The next thing you know, it's all over Facebook. It's all over social. But the worst part of this is they got her address from her license plate number. Someone must have had like a reverse, like either knew an authority in the law or whatever. Right. And they started posting her home address. They found out where she worked. They started, badgering her at her work. It was horrifying. And then
It
going
is.
to her family members. That is not right. And like we said in our book, how would you like to be badgered for something your family member did? And at the end of the day, again, I'm not saying what she did was right. It was really wrong. And now I have to tell you something like, I can be really pissed off on the road. And you know what? I just sit there calmly and I think of Mercedes' mom and I think of who's around me. I'm just going to be nice. And I'm just going to, man, I'm telling you, every story we share in this book, it will just make you think twice about your offline behavior.
Well, we all are sometimes angry at situations. We all have a fuse. I mean, it's part of being human, and it's, I think, inhuman to deny that. But we do need to recognize that this technology makes the discovery of how we might act out so much more easy.
Technology has also put us in this place of FOMO, fear of missing out, that we need to not only be someplace immediately, but we need to be checking in all the time. And if we're not checking in, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, like we are missing something or you're missing out. This is where your angst and anxiety comes in too. And I think that can also contribute to maybe some of your road rage.
Just one more anecdote that I want to mention from the book. There's so many. The book is so rich with examples, and there's such a great variety of them, unfortunately. But another one that I read that stuck out at me was the parent who shamed their own child in order to get them to behave the way they wanted them to behave. I mean, that's really a sad story to me.
Yeah, parenting experts will tell you that nothing good can come of shaming a child publicly on the internet. And we've seen it done over and over and over again. When you dig into her story, you find out her backstory and why she did it. I'm not condoning it. But what we find out is the mother herself, she had this child when she was like 16, 17 years old. She also was incarcerated. So she was in trouble with drugs. She was sexually active. She had a lot of problems. She grew up in a broken home. And what she wants to do is try to make sure that this doesn't happen to her daughter. So she was scared to death because her daughter was on Facebook pretending to be a 19-year-old and seductively chatting with older men. She was scared. She went out there and she ran a video saying, did you know that my daughter, wears panties, that say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday on them? And she still watches the Disney Channel. She's not 19. She's only 13. And I mean, the mom overreacted. There's no doubt. And I don't think parents realize the psychological damage they can do to a child with doing this humiliation. And that's why we spoke with, the parent psychologist also in there. Talks about something like this. At the end of the day, there's no winners when something happens like this. But what I say, there's also understanding. Like, I got it that she was really just trying to protect her daughter, but there are no winners. You know what I'm saying?
I totally agree. There are no winners. Yeah. There are no winners.
And I'm not trying to toot my own horn at all. What I say to people all the time, Shame Nation is not only packed with solutions, it's packed with stories, because I can go out and I can speak to assemblies, you can speak at conferences, and you can throw out the statistics. People don't remember statistics. They almost don't even care about statistics. Like, I can tell you that 80% of employers have social media policies. I can tell you that 73% of adults witness online hate every day. I can tell you that 70% of employers will Google you before they hire you. I can tell you all these statistics. People don't care about this. What they remember is the story.
Yeah, it's a great collection of very powerful stories that hopefully will help everybody raise their awareness about how to behave and how to treat others. And it's so important in today's world, especially now that we have this tool, this smartphone with these amazing platforms which give us so much power in our communications. I feel like there's so much more to cover. I mean, this topic is so rich.
Unfortunately, this topic continues to evolve and get bigger and bigger every day.
I mean, I almost feel like every news story has got an aspect of cyber shaming to it lately.
With the online hate and cyberbullying and
Yeah.
shaming, it's almost in every headline, sadly, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Without getting too political or talking too much about what's in the news, because I really want to focus on your work because your work is so important. I think that your work is the solution to this problem.
Well, basically, what I try to do is I'm a contributor for Huffington Post. I'm a contributor for Psychology Today, Family Online Safety Institute, and I continuously try to bring new ways to combat online hate, new ways for parents to continually open up the dialogue with their kids. It starts at the top. I continually say this. It starts with us as the adults, as the parents, to create education, to create awareness, to bring that prevention to our kids. I mean, I hear it all the time that I know the parents always turn to the schools will turn to the parents, but at the end of the day, it takes a village. So I like to consider myself an advocate, that vessel, that tool, that person that's going to start bringing the information. And I work with a bunch of colleagues. Since I won that big landmark case back in 2006, I've become synonymous with this internet safety crowd. We are continually looking for new ways to talk to parents, to educate kids, not only to learn about online reputation, but how to build up their digital resilience. So they understand that when they're looking at this online hate, that they're able to deal with it and they're able to have the resilience to understand that it's not about them and to immediately click out and go and tell an adult or someone else. Unfortunately, today, more and more statistics are showing that kids, when they're facing harassment or abuse online, they're going to tell a peer. And that's okay. I'd rather them tell somebody than nobody. But the more that parents become interested in the online life of their child, the more comforting the kids are going to be able to come and talk to the parent about what's going on online. A lot of parents that haven't been where I've been don't really understand the importance of what their children are going through their screens right now.
Sure. And I also think that not everybody is so into it like I am. And I think there's a lot of parents who don't really understand.
Well, if you really think about it for a moment, it's just about impossible for them to understand digital life because they weren't brought up with it. I slipped into it because I was a target of it. And if you've never been a target of online bullying or online shaming, you really don't understand it. Because I remember years ago when I went through it, just like traditional bullying, when people used to say, oh, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. Words do hurt you. But when they're put digitally, electronically on the internet, they're magnified. And the kids, just like me as an adult, I would go back and revisit them over and over again. This is what the kids do too. And then worse than that, now, how many likes are they garnishing? How many more people are commenting on them? And it's getting worse and it's getting bigger and it's getting bolder. What is that doing to me as a person? It's diminishing me. And then my self-esteem is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's what it did to me. And I became a recluse. I went into the deepest, darkest hole. And this was me at 40-something years old. Imagine what it does to a child. And see, these parents out there don't understand the depths of depression. We're at a time today in our country, in our world really, where statistics are showing the highest rates of teen depression is right now in our country. And I totally believe it's because of technology.
Right. And so as the technology develops and we have new technology and new capabilities as a result of that technology, we need to, I guess, come up with concepts such as digital resilience in order to counteract what can be the negative effects of this new technology.
Right. Because we have to let these kids know, again, building their digital resilience, that they are only words. We understand that, but these kids really don't. But this is where our dialogue, and I often say short chats are better than no chats. With my latest book, Shame Nation, it was also about adults, because I really feel adults are left out. It's very important to understand that adults are being victims too, but adults are also the ones behaving like children. So I really encompass everyone. And I mean, we have to also check in with our behavior. And this is what I say to parents too. If you're out there, especially, we all witnessed it during the 2016 political season. I don't care what side of the political fence you are on. I don't care how much you hated the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. If you were out there insulting one or the other, your child was watching you. And I don't care how passionate you are about one candidate or the other. If you're perpetrating hate in one direction, you are giving your child the green light to do the same. And that's just the way I feel about it. I get this question posed to me a lot. They say to me, what do you think about the leader of our land, the president, and the way he tweets out all these, let's say bullyish comments on Twitter?
Yes.
And you know what I say? Well, let's call it what it is. Yes, he does. But I don't even like giving him the credit to even comment on it, because it is bullish behavior. You know what my concern is? My concern is all the people that heart it, that like it and retweet it. Those are the people that we really need to be concerned about.
Yeah.
Because we have almost half the country condoning this behavior. So there's where we need to start and think, wow, how can people be condoning this type of incivility? Because we really need to start bringing civility and humanity back to our society. That's my opinion.
Oh, Sue, I couldn't agree more. And let me tell you, as an attorney, I mean, one of the things that I dislike the most about my work is, in my practice, how uncivil other attorneys treat each other. And it's unfortunate because it deters a lot of people who are really good lawyers from wanting to do this kind of work.
Yeah, and it takes away from any type of impact you're going to have. And it's like, to even answer that question is just redundant, because there's just nothing about his tweets that are worth answering. They're bullish tweets, the ones that some people name off to me. I just simply say, as a parent, you have to say, you know what, that's just not behavior that we approve of in our home. We don't act that way. It's inappropriate behavior.
Yeah.
Period.
It's sad that the president of the United States, who's supposed to be like the ultimate role model,
right,
is someone we can't model ourselves after, or shouldn't anyway, because I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know.
I do
Moving
know.
on.
Let's move on.
Yes.
Other than your own situation, I just wanted to know, are there any examples of anybody who's been a victim of cyberbullying that particularly stand out to you?
When it comes to adults, there was the college professor, highly intelligent English professor, Anne Marie Cherney, she was divorced, a mother of two, single mom, very smart, and she simply friended someone on Facebook. And I thought, wow, when I heard her story, first of all, I was really mortified at what happened, because she is one of the nicest. If you were to read her story, look at her, you would never in a million years think that of what happened to her. But what happened to her was, it started off with a simple friend request from Facebook. And then she started dating him. It was a high school friend. And he had asked her for a few provocative pictures. There was nothing completely naked from what she shared with us in the interview. Just a few pictures on the bed, etc. And then about 6 months later, the relationship sort of went south and she broke up with him, but he wasn't ready to break up. And suddenly he kept threatening her. He goes, well, if you don't want to get back together with me, I'm going to take these pictures and I'm going to expose you. And she's like, oh, please stop it. The next thing you know, he's selling her pictures on eBay. All these pictures, and he had photoshopped them.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, and it was just horrible. Well, eBay was one thing. So she's calling up eBay, or she's emailing them, and she's getting them off eBay. Now what he does is he puts them on the college's Facebook pages and sends them all to the college, like the dean of the college and everything like that. Oh, my
goodness.
Oh, it was just horrifying for her. So she went to the police department. I think it was in Maryland, Baltimore over there, and they could do nothing. they could do nothing. They said, I'm sorry, it's electronic. At that point, there was no laws. So now what happens next is he puts her on Craigslist, posts her name and address and says, come on over if you want to have some sex. Believe it or not, it was like revenge porn.
Crazy.
So now it's like doxing. So this time she was able to go to the FBI, and it was horrible. And she finally got to, I forget what it was exactly. You'd have to read the book. But anyway, from that time forward, she actually joined up with Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, and they'd been passing laws that she actually got on legislation and passed laws against revenge porn in her state because of what happened to her. It was just horrifying.
Horrifying.
And she had like no recourse. And she said she would stay up till like 2, 3 in the morning, just like every time she saw something posted, she would go to terms of service and write them, and they would remove it. This is something I used to do too. Whenever I used to see stuff going up on different blog sites about myself, and for all the listeners out there, if you're being bullied, if you're being shamed, if you're being harassed, one of the steps you can take is every forum out there, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, wherever, they have the terms of service or code of conduct. And this is what Anne-Marie did. This is what I did. It's just so time consuming. Anne-Marie would tell us how she would stay up to 2, 3 in the morning doing this. Go to the terms of service, go to the code of conduct, read it. And it usually says where your perpetrator is violating their code of conduct in accordance to. Usually it's harassment, abusive language, hate speech, or posting these pictures that don't belong to them because they're your pictures. They're violating it for sure. And you can usually get them down within 24 hours, especially when it comes to revenge porn. If you have a problem, there's a great organization called withoutmyconsent.org. It's run by all attorneys, pro bono, by the way. They help out all victims of revenge porn. And there's also Undox Me if you've been doxxed. So this is one thing I have to tell all your listeners. There are so many resources out there today. A decade ago, when I was being harmed and abused, there was nothing, literally nothing out there. Today, there's Online SOS Network, which is a whole resource center of therapy, therapy centers for you. And most of them are at no cost, I didn't know if you realize that, Jennifer.
I'm aware that there's a lot of resources, but I don't think that there's enough awareness out there. So it's so important to get the word out.
Right.
You write in your book about diffusing digital drama. Can you give a couple tips to the listeners that's something that they can do if they're in a situation where they're being bullied or they're being shamed or any other kind of negative communication is happening involving them? Basically, what I want to know are the ways to respond to the trolls.
Okay. Well, I love going back to Mitch Jackson because there's no one better to describe a troll than Mitch. And
yes.
Mitch came up with the recreational troll and the criminal troll. And the recreational trolls, they're the ones that we don't mind having because they're just annoying people who will pop up on occasion in our news feeds or our social media feeds, and they eventually go away once you ignore them. It's those criminal trolls like the ones I had that are set up to come out and destroy you. And those are the ones that we all have to be concerned about.
Why don't you explain to listeners what is the online disinhibition effect?
It was Dr. John Suler who wrote a research paper on this, explaining the lack of the physical link between the attacker and the victim. And it makes it easier for the attacker to say things to someone online when they don't actually have to see them face to face. And it makes sense because they're not seeing the emotion. They don't have any empathy. They don't care. And what's happening in the country, or I should say in the whole world, and the way we live today, people have so much anger and frustration today, and they're just taking it out on their keyboard. And since they don't have to look at you or face you, it's just easier for them just to keep on clicking away. And it's really just gotten so out of hand. So what we say to people, and like the recent PSA that we've seen that Monica Lewinsky put out in real life, I think to me really verbalized it perfectly. If you wouldn't say it to their face, why would you say it on a screen? And like she had said in many interviews, she's only had maybe a handful of people come up to her in the past decade or two and said anything nasty to her in real life in her face, but online it's been like millions of people. And that's exactly what the disinhibition effect is all about. So when it comes to trolling, this is what the one study said. Any one of us could be a troll, because if you think about it, these millions of people that have been attacking even Monica Lewinsky, and I'm going to tell you something, she's attacked by literally, I bet you, millions of people over the past 17, 18 years since that whole incident.
Yeah.
She went on Dr. Oz and promoted our book. She wrote the foreword. She's also in this chapter here, and she's one of the ways to fight back on trolls is becoming an advocate against cyberbullying. And when she went on Dr. Oz, and I went to Dr. Oz's Facebook page, and I want to share with you, Jennifer, it was really ugly. I mean, people were blaming Monica for the most hellacious things regarding the presidential race, if you can believe it, going back to Hillary.
Yeah.
And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, you know what? This is really horrible. So I got on there, you know, as my sous chef, I don't hide my name. And because people are saying like, well, I wouldn't buy any book that Monica is on. I'm thinking to myself, really? Well, you know what? Here I am, sous chef. I'm the author of this book. And I said, you know what? Monica Lewinsky is a genuine person. And how dare you? I mean, I fought back. I fought back for Monica because
good for you.
Now we're going to get into in this chapter that you're talking about right now. We had a young lady named Caitlin Sater, and we called her the fighter. When you read this chapter, we have 6 or 7 different characters and how they fought off trolls. And Caitlin went right after her troll, and she fought back. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to use Caitlin's advice and fight back at the trolls. And you know what? That's what I did. I did a clap back. I clapped back at them. And I said, you know what? How dare you guys? Monica's a good person. She's been advocating for, you know, cyberbullying awareness. And I went down the list of her Be Strong, da, da, da. And you know what happened? It was the strangest thing. It was exactly like what happened in my book. I had all these people coming to my side. And they were like, that's right. Monica is a good person. And she's been fighting this. And it was like amazing. It was a ripple effect of kindness.
Yeah.
That to me was really enlightening. So, you know, you have to think about all that.
Aside from Monica, can you think of any other examples?
Carol Todd is a really, really interesting story. Carol lost her daughter tragically. Amanda Todd committed suicide after being a victim of sextortion. And Carol, about 3 to 4 months after Amanda had died by suicide, this troll started badgering her online. And he sent her one direct message that said, you're an alcoholic whore. You should die like your daughter.
Oh,
and Carol was like, what? And she's like, do you know who I am? And he says, yeah, I know who you are. Your daughter hung herself. I mean, it was cold and it was nasty. And, you know, Carol kept going back to him and saying, well, why are you doing this to me? He goes, because this is what I do to all parents that lost their kid. I mean, he was just, but you know what? Carol kept going back and kept going back to him and saying, why are you doing this to me? But what? And she started a dialogue with him, and she found out that he lived in a broken home. He was like with foster care. And before you know it, she befriended him. She taught him about empathy. He actually went out and he got a job. He started feeding the homeless, and they're still good friends today.
That's an amazing story.
There was something that was really tugging at her heart, saying that this kid need help. And he never again ever trolled anyone.
It just shows you the power of empathy. And what's beautiful about that story is that despite her own tragic loss of her daughter, she was able to empathize or communicate with this troll and see the humanity in him and use it to reach him. That's a really remarkable thing to do. I don't know if I would be able to do that. She's obviously very strong.
She is very strong, a very strong person.
Can you please tell listeners like the top 3 steps that you recommend that someone can take to reboot their life after they've been the victim of cyberbullying or a digital shaming?
Well, I'm going to tell you, the very first thing you need to do is to allow yourself, permit yourself to be angry. And that sounds really ridiculous, but I always thought if I was going to get angry, it was saying that my perpetrator wins, that that person wins because I'm mad. But actually, permitting yourself to be angry, it's not only normal, it energizes you to take it to the next level. It energizes you to go out there and be mad enough to redefine your next step in life, to redefine your reputation. It gives you the energy to be who you need to be. So don't be ashamed that you're mad. It's okay to be mad. I just thought being mad meant that they win. They don't win. Permit yourself. It's okay to be angry and be damn right angry. Mm-hmm. You're allowed to be angry. I just felt for so long I wouldn't allow myself to be mad. You know how you wear that mask, like, oh no, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay to be angry.
I think that's a necessary part of a person healing from a situation, is not to deny the anger. They're justified in being angry, but there are constructive ways of expressing that anger. But you have to express it. You have to let it out.
Right. And then you really have to accept it. You have to move forward with your shame, accepting that you've been shamed and saying it's going to be okay. The shame does not define you. It's just that simple. Your life is going to change, but you have to look at it as an opportunity. And again, it doesn't matter what everybody else is saying. You're going to accept it. You're going to move forward with it. And it's going to be a wonderful thing. You're going to thrive after it. Believe it or not, I have found so many new doors have opened. But again, it's all in your perspective. You have to not only allow yourself to be angry, you have to allow yourself to accept it. And one of the biggest things, and everyone's going to be like, oh, really? You have to take care of yourself. I found that I let myself go. And I did, because emotionally, first of all, emotionally, you're drained, but physically, I let myself go. What I'm telling everybody listening, you have to get out of the house, because I did. I became a recluse. You have to get out. You have to join a gym. You have to start walking. You have to start running. People outside don't care what your online reputation looks like. Get out of your house. Get out walking. Get out exercising. Finally, when I started even feeling better mentally is when I started taking care of myself physically.
Sure.
I mean, that should really be my number one, to be honest with you. But that is like the biggest thing I can tell people, is to take care of yourself physically. It's so funny. When I went to write the book and I was talking to my agent, I wanted the whole book to be about overcoming digital shame, because I felt like there was nothing out there to tell us how to overcome digital shame. And she's like, well, you just can't have a book about overcoming, because not everybody is a victim of shame. I just felt it was so important, because nobody ever told me how to overcome it. And it took me almost a decade to learn how to overcome it. It's just really hard, because while you're going through it, you don't know, But take care of yourself.
I think that what's interesting, because so much of my life is spent online. I feel like I am interacting with screens between my legal work and then my consulting work and the social media work that I do and the podcasting. The digital piece of my life has just really increased exponentially this last year. And I think that that's true for a lot of people. But it's important to remember that there's a world outside of what happens online. And you're right, in order to recover or keep perspective, you would have to step away from the online space and realize there's more to life than just what's happening on my screen and on these social platforms.
Right. And I think it's healthy in every area of our life. I think all of us need to unplug, just simply unplug.
I'm going to admit, I'm guilty of spending a lot of time on my phone, but I do a lot of business on my phone.
But isn't that the excuse that we use? I do it too. I'll be with my kids. Oh, wait a minute. I just have to answer this one email.
Yeah.
I just have to get this one thing out. We're all doing it. We're all doing it.
it's important to set boundaries. When I sit down to a meal, I do not have my phone with me unless it's something super urgent. I put it away, I silence it, it can wait. I really want to be present with the person that I'm dining with, like fully present. And it really bothers me when you go to a restaurant and you sit down with a group of friends or people that you know and their phones are face up on the table. So I think it's really, we can't lose the art of face-to-face communication.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I don't think we have enough of it. If you think about it, I mean, today in America, we have 92% of people I call it armed with cell phones, smartphones today. So wherever you are, like if you read in my book, wherever you are, we're not afforded an oops moment today without the risk of it going viral. And I'm just going to share with you, I was not a perfect parent. I don't know any perfect parent, but just like that mom that lost her toddler at the zoo, listen, that could have been any one of us. I mean, that exact moment somebody put that video on that poor little child, that was not her fault. I don't care. It could have been any one of us, right? That mother was crucified. I mean, and they shot the gorilla. Remember that story?
Horrible. Yeah.
Horrible. The way life is today, we are all a click away from digital disgrace.
People can be so mean. And I tell my clients all the time, I know you're angry. I know you're frustrated. Don't do it, because there are cameras everywhere. Everyone's holding one. And then there are cameras everywhere, especially in a city like Los Angeles. Everything, we are being watched all the time, whether we are aware of it or not.
That's right. You read the divorce attorney we interviewed in there, how she uses social media for all her mediation.
Oh, yeah. You have to. I do too. And, you know, I tell my clients all the time, don't delete anything. You can't do that either. But we have to be so aware. Well, with this new technology and these new social platforms and the prevalence in our life, there's got to be an evolution in how we conduct ourselves. And that's why your book is so important, because you have really great advice for what we can all do in order to protect ourselves. And if we happen to become a victim, how to recover, how to move on with our lives. And I'm just so grateful that you wrote this book. And I'm so, so grateful that you took the time to talk to me about it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I mean, we need you. And thank you for turning a really crappy situation in your own life into something that can help other people. I'm all about that.
I appreciate what you're doing too.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sue, for being on the podcast.
I look forward to hearing it and passing it on.
Please read Shame Nation. And more importantly, please be kind to each other. If you are interested in exploring whether you are a good fit for my business and communications programs, please visit romehowell.com/apply and book a call. It's absolutely free. Rome Howell is produced in Los Angeles, California, with production support and editing services by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios in Chicago. I'm Jennifer Gardner. Let's stay connected at Rome Howell on Facebook, at Jen B. Gardner on Twitter, and at Jen B. Gardner 22 on Instagram. Thanks again for listening, and take care.